Okay, so like I said, I'm John Mikolaj. I'm associated with Global Teams International Mission Organization. And our discussion, or what I will present is discipleship through development. I became involved in missions in Nepal some 10 years ago. I found when I went to just visit a friend, I wasn't thinking missions, I was just going to visit a friend. It happened to be during the monsoon, and during the monsoon, the rain just comes, and I saw reports of thousands sick, hundreds hospitalized, scores dying, and I said, well, why is that? Well, it turns out that because sanitation is very, very poor in Nepal, all the waste gets, during the monsoon, routed to the rivers, and you can imagine the result of that just multiplies with lots of stomach sickness and such things. So I said, well, this shouldn't be. And then I looked around and I said, Lord, surely you must do something. And so I looked to see who was doing what where, and I thought, well, maybe there's something I could do to help. And I looked, and the Lord said, well, I want you to do something. So, okay, fine. But I had no background. I'm an engineer. I am an engineer, but water treatment and solving world hunger and doing all those things, that's not in my wheelhouse, if you will. So I thought, well, how do you do this? And what ended up happening is a series of divine appointments where God connects, just chance meetings. Oh, by the way, I know this guy who, this thing, and just the whole thing snowballed. And I began working with trying to help Christian leaders in villages help the health of their communities by equipping the church to simply treat the water with disinfectant that people were drinking. So instead of drinking just the bacteria-laden water, church members would go to their community, treat the drinking water the people were going to drink with chlorine, a little bit of chlorine to kill the bacteria, and then all of a sudden sicknesses would go away, and then all of a sudden the people that had no use for Christians because it's a non-Christian culture, all of a sudden there began to be an attractiveness. The Christians became attractive because of what they could bring to the value they brought back into the community. So, okay, how do we extend this? And so I want to take the picture of bridges, if you will, because water purification and doing things with water usually means infrastructure to people, and because it's infrastructure, then it ends up being a project, and it's like, how is working with projects missions? So kind of with the idea of bridges, you have, for a natural project, you have problems and solutions, you have whatever some needs are, you have some resources, and then you have this whole underlying dynamic of the words that we use and the meanings that people associate with it. So I could be talking about, and I usually do, I talk about, I work with water purification in villages, and people automatically assume, what would be the first thing you would assume?
Dig a well.
Dig a well. Sure. And I said, no, not. So you see, we all come to any conversation that we have, we come with kind of an assumption of meanings. Well, it's the same way on the mission field. And so we began the process of multiplying or extending the water treatment successes we had in one village to see, oh, can we do that in this village? Can we do that in this village, in this one? And we began to see really, we distinguish between relief and development. And I want to do that here because what I want to do, what we learned, is that it's better to focus on the development side of things and I have them compared. So relief is short term. Relief is just a way of like an emergency response thing. So you bandage a wound as a relief effort to stop the blood flow. You provide individual water filters, for example, or arrange to get a water supply truck into an area that's maybe had a natural disaster happen. Usually relief efforts are driven from the outside. In other words, somebody outside the community hears of a need in the community, and then poof, all of a sudden resources show up in that community. Again, outside resources. That's different than development. And for our purposes, development is long-term. Development is a social change. It is a new construct in that culture, whatever the culture is. It doesn't restore. It's not intended to restore things. It's more of a transmutation, if you will. For development, there's local ownership, and for the most part, you try to leverage local resources to accomplish the new thing that you're doing for a couple of reasons. So it's sustainable, so that it's accessible, and moreover, it's what people are used to. So you have generally fewer logistics challenges if it's locally resourced. So, so then we began these projects, and we immediately ran into problems. And the way that the reason we ran into the problems is because of the whole differences in meaning versus words. So the way that I would run a project, and maybe we would be used to running projects here, is, okay, what's the problem? Your experience identifies what the problem is. Whatever our desired result is, and the experience, the environment of that location, well, that'll dictate the solutions that we'll consider. We'll say, well, do we have knowledge gaps? What do we need to know in order to do what we need to do, or construct? We have resource gaps, and so projects, for the most part, focus on the last part. Said, close the gaps and implement the solution. That's what projects do. So it's a start to a finish. You have an end product right there, and you kind of go like this. You're done. But discipleship is not like that. So in discipleship, God leads, we follow. Okay, all of a sudden, we're not setting the plans. All of a sudden, God is. God is orchestrating appointments. So God opens our eyes to the problem, right? Just like what happened to me. I saw all these people sick and hospitalized. I said, this shouldn't be. What? God invites the solution team together, and as I indicated before, God, when we started to respond to the need for safe drinking water, well, I didn't know who to talk to. I had no idea where to go for any kind of resources or insights to deal with this problem. Well, but others that I met said, hey, I met this guy who, here's his phone number. Go call him. And that's, I don't know how many times those happen. But and that continues to happen. Whatever, God invites the solution team together, and so you get all these partners. You say, okay, here's what we see. Here's what I think the problem is. what do we need to do to fix or to address the problem that we see? And so God reveals resources and partners. God invites to solution implementation. Well, that's not a clear-cut beginning to end process. It ends up being iterative because God opens your eyes to a problem. You say, "Oh, I know what needs to fix that." But then, as He identifies partners, say like village residents, and maybe I might have some idea as an engineer what's needed to fix this problem in the village. Well, cultural habits and the way people usually carry out their day and their customary activities in the village, that may invalidate the solution I would come up with. So, and often has. And so God gathers the team kind of works through in an iterative process what's some solutions, and then you go to the village and say, okay, what about, do we have the people resources to be able to implement the solution? And so for projects, we usually do a start to finish. For discipleship, we're used to doing discipleship, kind of an ongoing, kind of a growing thing. It's more of a process. But what I'm proposing is doing both of these together, side by side. Because when we start doing the project, all of a sudden, we end up getting to the question of values. For example, here's a question. Here's a value question. Who can decide what the problem priority is? How quickly should we address it? Who decides that? Well, I might have one idea. My country partner might have a completely different idea. Who decides? Well, a lot of that, our two different ideas have a lot to do on the values that we come into the discussion with. Who can set the problem scope? Who does that? Basically, who is able to invest and control the project is really what it amounts to. And that's a collaborative process. Right? That's collaborative. So here's an example of how we might do these two things. This project, this hard and fast equipment training outcome, specific outcome, with the discipleship process, and just the who can. Just asking the who decides question, right? So if I have in Luke chapter 10, the story of the Good Samaritan, right? So take that story. Well, who had mercy? Jesus' question was, who has, who is your neighbor? I suppose the one who displayed mercy, right? So you got that value. And so what I would do is the country partners and I would go through these scriptures, and we would discuss them, and then the results of our discussion would lead into the project questions. The who can do this, who can do that. James chapter 2, the rich man, the poor man. You remember that whole admonition. Well, who? Again, it's the value of a person. Who's the contributor? Who's the controller? Who's the contributor? What roles and positions do people play in the outcome of this project? A third one, Philemon, for example. Well, you remember Philemon, runaway slave. Onesimus was all of a sudden being returned to his owner, and what was Paul's injunction?
Treat him like a brother.
Treat him like a brother. Right. And so we would go through those scriptures and we say, well, what I would ask, well, how are these like your culture? And they would identify with it or not identify with it. It's like, well, and then how do you think Jesus? How did Jesus present these? What was Jesus' perspective on these? What's God's perspective on all these things? The displaying mercy, the issue of rank, social rank, the issue of how you manage social relationships, the issue of managing wealth. Does the rich person have a say? Does the high caste person have a say, and not the low caste? Does the poor not have a say? And so, as we would talk about those scriptures, and as we would do discipleship, all of a sudden it changed the answer, some of the conclusions of our project questions. Right? Well, who controls this project? And then, I suppose I should include more people. Well, okay. And that would be, and so you end up gathering people from the community then. Well, which community? This village? This village, or all the villages? And then will people from all the villages be comfortable coming together? What do we have to do to make a level playing field for all the people we want to contribute to the outcome, to the successful outcome of this project, whatever the project is? And so that's how the two things would work together. Let me go to this next one. So even though I said task-driven and discipleship, think of those kind of in parallel paths. Of course we have time. So one example of the way that worked out is we have a project in a low caste village with another. So we have one water purification service set up in a low caste village. Nearby is another low caste village, different caste, and so there's some social discomfort when they come together, if they come together. And the church is right between the two of them, right? So we said, okay, impartial, neutral ground. We'll meet together in the church building, and we'll have everybody will be together. We'll iron out who's doing what and where the resources are coming from, and all of those project meeting kinds of things. Well, the community leader that we're working with, although he's a member of the low caste village where the equipment is, he's just a little bit higher caste than the caste who we want to invite, who really needs the benefit of this project being completed. It's like, and to make things worse, he's educated. So not only is he by birth a higher caste, now he's educated, and so the people that we want to serve all of a sudden feel very uncomfortable because they're almost ashamed to come as equals, to be received as equals, to presume to be equals in an environment where they're clearly outclassed, if you will. And so there began a series of meetings. Okay, let's take the leader over here from the higher caste and go to the lower caste village. And are we welcome and able to talk? And then begin again going through these, the scriptures, these three scriptures that I mentioned: the Luke 10, the James chapter 2, and Philemon. Right? Both to Christians in both villages. I want the Christians to be able to serve their non-Christian neighbors, but I can't get the resources in their hands to make that happen. And so that's why we end up having to start with discipleship to make the development part work the way that we hope, work the way that it should. And so that part is still in process. I can't claim that will be a success story yet. We'll see. We'll see. But kind of in our story, it's like we see a need. We know what, we kind of have an idea that something has to happen, that something is not right. And we want to be part of God's work in changing the lives of others so that they can appreciate God for who He is, for His love, for His care, for His compassion on us. And a lot of it is we just take the next step that God makes obvious. That's what we learned. Like though I had no background in the water purification, the next step was take care of this phone number and call this such and such recommended person. And the outcome of that conversation, well, that's another step. And I can see the past. You can see the past because you walked it. The future's kind of not. It's kind of a little bit blurry, but you can see the step that you got to take. So take it. And that's my goal is to help you see that the development and discipleship can go together, and I think they complement one another. I'm going to leave you with one other thing. This global gospel progress map, right? The 1040 window. We saw that this morning. It's a very nice, very pretty and nice picture. I want you to keep that red area in your mind. Global water stress. Same areas are impacted. That water is one of the resources that ends up being at the bottom of conflict in areas that are least reached by the gospel. So when you're considering, well, how are we going to get access? How are we going to get access to these places when Christians can't go there, are generally not welcome, right? But development is welcome. Development is welcome. So how can we position ourselves to? My question to you is, how can we position ourselves to take advantage of the need and the opportunity and allow Christ to be made known in these areas? That's the end of my presentation. Questions that you have? I spoke very, very generally. And if you have specifics, I will.
I have a question. So why those three stories in the Bible? How did you pull those three out of all the stories in the Bible? Or were those just examples of three?
Those are examples because they have to do with values.
Okay.
That's all. That's all. Yes, ma'am.
I missed your introduction, so excuse me, but are you hired as a development person in your organization?
No.
So
No.
you had to see it as you go in the field.
Yes.
Do you have resources? I mean, obviously, if I were to end up there, I wouldn't know the first thing about water at all. But would there be a resource to refer to, or would you go for an NGO expert? I mean, if you had a third party in these discussions, how would you get them into it too? I mean,
Yes. So I don't know if you were here at the beginning, but God leads and we follow. What? That was my prayer. I said, God, I don't know what to do. What? I wouldn't know the first way to turn, much less to whom to turn. But God does.
Yeah.
And so part of my learning process, one of those ways that God builds partnerships is a local water treatment Culligan man kind of guy, water treatment business owner in our community, found out what I was doing, and he said, "What can I do?" And there's a water treatment training course and certification for Water Quality Association. He said, "Let me put you on my books, and you can take advantage of it as part of my business. My business will fund your training." Okay.
Is it common?
So, but God set that up.
Yeah, is it common in missions groups to have someone who does that though? I mean, like, suppose you're developing a business, helping a village develop a business for income.
There. You can speak to that better than I can.
My name is Bill Phillips. My wife is actually Global Teams, and I've done some work with Global Teams and Business's Mission. Without many notable successes, I would have to say. I spent a fair amount of time with the system that John is using in the box there, if you want to take a look at it, in water purification. And it's a very simple system. It's not very expensive, and you make a chlorine system that purifies water. It's like a 500 to 1 multiplier. And I tried several different ways in 3 or 4 countries, I guess, to try to find a way to use this sort of a system to provide a business that missionaries could use to help fund themselves. And in Pakistan, we did some work trying to set up tea shops. We did some other work. The only success there was a seasonal business. It did work. They found that they liked the pure water to make a summer drink that was popular, but it was seasonal. So it wasn't sustainable for the long term. The distribution, a lot of different problems. Tried it in Africa. One of the areas we went into after a series of floods, provided these to provide relief. John was talking about relief and development. In the relief effort, it was wonderful. I mean, one of these will serve several villages, provide pure water, lots of benefits. But once the people had received it as relief, they were not interested in paying for it. And you got to pay for it if it's going to be a business. And just a lot of different things like that. So it's not easy. It's a great concept. It works well, but I can't point to many successes where you could make a business out of it.
So our organization doesn't really have that. Other organizations, the ones that I'm familiar with, are more targeted toward water as a relief kind of effort. Water Mission, Life Water are 2 of them. Water Step, the third one. Most will work on a relief function, and so that's their model. Even the ones that I'm aware of that have done as a business model, once competition comes into the mix, then all of a sudden they're usually outpriced and pushed out of the market that way. So as an NGO trying to do a business, it's difficult. Businesses trying to do a business, well, yeah, because you can adjust your resources stream to accommodate even underselling, underbidding the market in order to gain market share. But as an NGO, that's not difficult to do. I'm sorry.
Well, no, I'm sorry, because I was hoping missionaries got all kinds of opportunities this way.
There's all sorts of opportunities. There are opportunities. It's just, and they'll show up. Right? And the part of it is you're not dependent on yourself. Remember, the Lord orchestrates things. We look for opportunities to collaborate with people. When we're in Nepal, when we're here, we're actively looking for it. Others are as well. So that's what I said. Don't be stymied or reluctant to take the step. Take the step, and then God will meet you with the resources when you need them. That's been our experience.
Unless your visa depends on it.
God even takes care of that. I mean, yeah, you still got to go stand in line at the immigration office and deal with all of the governmental things. But I've met people while I'm standing in line waiting at the immigration office. I've met people that I've worked with subsequent to that. So, I mean, God's church is a church for a reason, right? It's not just a group of individuals. It's people that are connected by the love of Christ, and there's ways that we can help one another that God makes evident.
That was my question. Are you there on a work visa or like a church visa?
No, I'm there. When I go on a tourist visa.
Oh, and you just stay for like a set amount of time.
And how often do you have to go out there?
The tourist visa is good for 5 months per calendar year. And so usually what I do is we'll kind of work on the development piece. I'll work with my regional partners, and we'll increase the number of villages that we're serving and that are serving their neighbors. And then when I come back here, I'm gathering resources to take back. I'm looking at new technologies to see, okay, we have thus and such problem there. Is this technology appropriate for applying in that place? So I do research and development here that services the needs there as well.
And John likes to learn. So this water thing was just a good challenge, and he got in there and dug into it, and he's like, I can do something about this. So I think that's what the lady was also talking about, is that God puts it in our hearts what we go for, and He provides.
So does that answer your question? You can